Welcome to the Ku-ring-gai Local Planning Panel meeting. On behalf of the
This
panel,
meeting is being recorded.
that's good. On behalf of the panel, I recognise the traditional custodians of the land of the Ku-ring-gai people on whose land we purport to meet. There are a couple of matters that I need to raise. Any person speaking at a local planning panel meeting are advised that their voice and personal information, including name and address, will be recorded as part of the meeting and made publicly available on Council's website. Accordingly, you must ensure that your address to the panel is respectful and you use appropriate language and refrain from making any defamatory statements or discriminatory comments. Ku-ring-gai Council does not accept any liability for statements, comments or actions taken by individuals during a meeting. And people connecting to the meeting are reminded that under the Local Government Act, the recording of meetings by a member of the public using any electronic recording device, including a mobile phone or video camera, is not permitted. Any person found recording without the permission of Council may be expelled from the meeting. On-demand viewing of each meeting will be available until the holding of the subsequent meeting. Recordings of the meeting are copyright protected and cannot be reused or reproduced without approval from Council. I propose now to call upon the members of the panel, comprising two experts, a community representative and a chairman, to introduce themselves in a short resume of matters relevant to their qualifications to be sitting on the panel. And I will ask each of the panel to indicate whether they have any declaration of interests to be made. I have no record of any apologies, so I'll go ahead and go with the introductions. My name is Angus Talbot. I'm the chair of the meeting. My background is in the law, solicitor, barrister, and a judge of the Land and Environment Court for 15 years. And I've been a member of the Waverley panel and the Inner West Council panel, formerly the Leichhardt panel, and this panel for a number of years. Going the rounds, the first person I see there is Mr. Gerard Teresi. I'll ask Mr. Teresi to introduce himself, if he wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Gerard Teresi. I'm a town planner with 35 years of experience, 15 years in local government, of which 5 was at director level, and the past 20 years as a consultant planner acting for councils as well as for applicants.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Lindsay Fletcher's my name. I too am a consultant town planner with some 50 years of experience, about half of that in local government, various councils around Sydney, and then 25 or so years as a consultant. I hold a master's degree in environmental planning. I'm an expert member of the panel. I've served on this panel now for 12 months or thereabouts, but I've been on various regional and Sydney district panels as well as local planning panels for quite a number of years. I have no conflicts of interest to declare on any of the items, Mr. Chairman.
Could you say those words, Mr. Teresi, please, about the conflict?
Yes, Mr. Chair, apologise. Yes, I've got no conflict of interest either, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The community representative is Mr. Ian Arnott. Mr. Arnott, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ian Arnott is my name. I am the community representative for this meeting for the Ku-ring-gai Local Planning Panel. I'm a resident of Turramurra, South Turramurra more explicitly. I also have a planning background. I just apologise to those that are viewing that my PC camera isn't working today, so I am visible on my phone camera, but not on the main screen. Sorry about that. I don't have any conflicts of
Yes.
interest associated
Yeah,
with
no, that was sort of our understanding. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, we'll proceed to, thank you, panel members. We'll proceed to deal with the order of business. There are only two matters listed for consideration at this public forum, and there are speakers listed only in respect of one of those matters. Each of the speakers will be given 3 minutes to formally make their observations. A sound will be heard at the conclusion of the time, and speakers are asked to respect that as being the time that they should wind up what they have to say. The speakers will be in order, first of all, from those who object to the development. Then if any legal representatives are present and wish to make legal points, they will be next, followed by any representatives of the applicant who wish to speak. The first matter on the, excuse me, if I can get there. The first matter on the agenda relates to the property in Nicholson Road, St Ives. There is no person listed to speak. The panel has considered the material that is presented to it, and it proposes to adopt the recommendation made by the council officers to approve the development subject to one minor matter, which is an amendment to condition 16, where the words 2 persons will be replaced by the words 1 person. The minutes will reflect that decision in due course, and they'll be published as soon as practicable. The next matter relates to just have to clear my throat. Excuse me. To the property 41 Tennyson Avenue and 105 Eastern Road, Turramurra, and that is to demolish existing structures and to construct a commercial development. There are a number of speakers listed in relation to that development, and we will now proceed to hear from them in order as they appear on the list that I have. And the first person I ask, therefore, to speak is Catherine Lutjen. Are you there, Ms. Lutjen?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and assisting us to reach our decision in relation to this matter. Your 3 minutes commences now. Thank you.
Okay, so I have 2 points relating to my property, which is the corner of Eastern Road and Worcester Place. Number 2, I am diagonally opposite the main proposed entrance for the Harris Farm entrance or the development. I've looked and researched a number of things, and what I find is Eastern Road's busy the best of times. They're single lanes, they're not double lanes, nor is there provisioning for double lanes. In a development of that size, you need a slip lane to turn into that main entrance. Definitely the virtual diagram that's showed and is on the website. I have a double garage directly opposite. It is proposed 10 metres from their entrance on the opposite side, their main entrance. They state that there's going to be trucks as well as the 90-car carport to go underneath in the basement. My direct double main bedroom windows are directly opposite the main entrance. And if we've got trucks that are going to be loading in and out, which will happen after hours, which most obviously happens, I'm going to be hearing continued noise throughout the night of trucks reversing with sensors. We hear that now in the distance with the shops along Eastern Road. But when I purchased my property 20 years ago, that was a given, and I knew that that was there. So I'm concerned that I'm not going to be able to get out of my double garage. We have 2 cars that are parked there, that we've got 2 full-time workers in the household, and we need access. I currently have to cross double lines coming from heading north to enter the garage. When I exit the garage, because I can't cross double lines now, I have to usually reverse out, go up into Worcester and do a U-turn. Now, what I'm seeing is if there's going to be a slip lane or even just traffic parked there to enter, I am not going to be able to get out of my double garage. The best of times. We struggle enough with time. And then the second point being the noise and the impact that we're going to have with trucks being able to enter and leave, as well as high number of cars to that driveway 24/7, which is the proposed operating hours of the developer. So that's basically it. 2 key concerns, one about where my main bedroom window, double windows are, and the noise directly opposite, and the second one with access to my double garage, which is 10 metres from the entry of Harris Farms, proposed Harris Farm development.
Thank you for your assistance, Ms. Luthgen, and you'll appreciate that the members of the panel have been to the site, so they'll appreciate what your point is in relation to the impact upon your property. Thank you for your assistance.
Thank you.
Next person that I have listed to speak is John Broadbent. Are you there, Mr. Broadbent? I see you are. Can you hear me? You must be on mute, are you, Mr. Broadbent?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Okay. Thank you for coming to assist us, Mr. Broadbent. Your time is starting now.
Thank you. I am speaking against the DA. Its size is simply inappropriate for a neighbourhood centre, and that being the case, it is not in the public interest for it to be built in that location. According to the LEP, the overriding planning document used to assess this DA, there is just one objective of a neighbourhood centre. That objective is to, quote, provide a range of small-scale retail, business and community uses that serve the needs of people who live or work in the surrounding neighbourhood. In contrast, a larger precinct, a local centre, is assessed against multiple objectives, but the corresponding retail objective states to provide a range of retail uses that serves the needs of people who live in, work in, and visit the local area. You can see the objective of a neighbourhood centre is much narrower, designed to provide a range of small-scale businesses servicing people in the surrounding neighbourhood. Small-scale retail solely for the surrounding neighbourhood. This is important, for it provides a sense of the size of what a neighbourhood centre should be. There are 5 other neighbourhood centres within a few kilometres. The size of those centres ranges from 625 to 2,290 square metres. Presently, the Eastern Road shopping village spans 1,512 square metres, already the 3rd largest neighbourhood centre. Yet the DA argues that doubling the size of the precinct to over 3,000 square metres would mean that it would still retain the scale of a neighbourhood centre. This is plainly wrong. Its expanded size would make it the largest neighbourhood centre by far and much closer to the size of a local centre. The undesirable scale of the proposal becomes even more apparent when we look at car parking spaces. Presently, there are 42 car spaces available for the shopping centre village. The development pencils in an additional 111 spaces, an almost 4-fold capacity. For a neighbourhood centre, the numbers simply do not stack up. That provides a segue to my next point, why this development is not in the public interest. As I've emphasised, Ku-ring-gai's LEP states that the objective for a neighbourhood centre is focused upon those within the surrounding neighbourhood. The public interest test, therefore, should focus upon that sliver of the community. Now, the wishes of the local community can be clearly seen in the results from last year's council election. In the ward that encompasses the Harris Farm project, the most popular candidate to be elected by a significant margin had never run for any political office until that election. The will to do so came out of concern about what was happening in the Eastern Road precinct, and she won convincingly. The other candidate elected to the ward voted against this unwelcome development of the precinct when he was on the previous council. Tellingly, the previous councillor who supported it was dumped by the community at the election.
Excuse me, time is up.
The public interest is automatically clear. The community in the surrounding neighbourhood do not want this inappropriate development here. A development of this size belongs in a local or major centre.
Thank you, Mr.
DA
Broadbent.
should be rejected.
I'll see if there's any questions, Mr. Broadbent, for you. Mr. Fletcher, do you have any questions for Mr. Broadbent?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the point that he's putting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Teresi?
I'm the same, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Arnott, have you any questions as the community rep?
None from me, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Broadbent, and the panel will take into account the points that you have made.
Thank you.
The next person that I invite to put their views is Barbara Murphy. Do I see you?
Hello, I can't get my video. Oh, yes, there I am.
There you are.
Yep.
Welcome, Ms. Murphy. And you ready for your 3 minutes to commence now?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of Alice Street and I've made a number of representations opposing this development, and I strongly stand by the view and supporting facts put forward in my submissions that the proposal represents overdevelopment of the site. Combined with existing Eastern Road shops, it provides a major shopping precinct, over 3,000 square metres, not counting the al fresco dining and play areas, open 15 hours a day, 7 days. Given it's located squarely in the middle of a residential area, I believe it poses an unacceptable health risk to the community during excavation construction, and the development will pose unacceptable impact on the neighbourhood and local environment, and as such contravenes KLPP 15. In my opinion, it's outside of the definition of B1 neighbourhood shops and more aligned to B2. Having regard to the development assessment report, I ask the panel to consider my comments and some concessions to the neighbourhood and local ecology. The assessment report has reference only to one gate opening to Alice Street and says it will be signed as an emergency exit only. But there's no mention of another planned entrance gate on Alice Street located further to the west. Now, this doesn't accord with the KMC DCP Part 14K, where entrances are restricted to Eastern Road and Tennyson only. It's not needed and will cause customer parking along Alice Street. Reducing the operating hours, say to no longer than 12 hours for the supermarket, more aligned with the Eastern Road shops. The opening hours proposed are not representative of most neighbourhood shops or even shops in town centres. It'll draw customers away from town centres and out of area, especially when other shops are shut. And this is not within the intent of a B1 zoning. I don't understand the assessment report comment that this is just a matter for market forces. In the last 2 years, Alice Street has seen a devastating loss of protected native tree canopy as a consequence of development. I'm asking for a reconsideration of the choice of plantings, especially at the corner of Alice and Eastern Road, where it's proposed to plant ornamental orange trees and deciduous pears. It would help restore some of the local ecology by planting fast-growing natives. It wouldn't make any difference to the applicant, but it would provide privacy and be more visually and environmentally sympathetic to the location. I mean, this isn't a farm, it's shops and it's marketing. And the representation of the orange trees shown on the plans is just not realistic. The site setback to Alice Street doesn't conform with the KMC DCP plan Part 14K. The pergola and seating areas are clearly well forward of the building line of 1 Alice Street documented in the DCP. Council previously commented to the applicant that the outdoor dining area and pergola areas north of the conservatory be removed or reduced, saying an active street frontage is not required to be provided to Alice Street and priority is for a landscape buffer. Given the conservatory is planned as a food and drink premises operating for 15 hours every day, isn't it even more important this alfresco seating area be deleted or reduced in size and replaced with landscaping so as to meet with council controls protecting privacy and amenity of adjoining residents? Why is there an exemption here from the rules? And finally, I restate my concerns as to the inadequacy of the assessment of traffic, especially in regard to feeder roads and intersections, as it doesn't reflect the reality of traffic issues now and for what will come. Thank you.
Thank you for your assistance, and those matters will be the subject of close consideration by the panel, let me assure you.
Thank you.
The remaining persons listed to speak all purport to be in favour of the development application, and I assume that those 4 people are here as a team, as it were. Is there any particular spokesman who wishes to speak, or is there just an opportunity for the panel to discuss the development with those who are here?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. It's Ian. It's Ian here.
Yes.
Is it possible to ask the previous speaker?
I'm sorry, I do apologise, Mr. Arnott. Thank you. Ms. Murphy.
Yep.
Mr. Arnott wishes to raise some issues with you.
Yes.
You'd be happy to answer the questions. I'll leave it to Mr.
Yes.
I'll leave it to Mr. Arnott. I do apologise for not doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Murphy, for your presentation. Just a couple of questions. Can I ask where in Alice Street you live?
Yeah, and 20.
And is that opposite, or is it on the same side? On the same side?
No, it's not. It's not opposite, and it's not on the same side as Harris.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You talked about the provision of native vegetation and the concern with providing introduced species to the area, or would you see a bit, and you were concerned about the impact of the outdoor seating area and the pergolas forward of the building line along Alice Street.
Yep.
Would you see any benefit, if the application was to be approved, in the provision of or the retention of the camellia hedge that I see exists along that boundary at the moment?
I think there has been a decision to keep the trees that were on the verge, which were originally planned to be taken out. I mean, I'm all for the keeping as much vegetation as possible, but I don't know how that would work with the construction that's required. You know, I'm not sure. That would be something probably for the applicant. But obviously for me, keeping as much vegetation as possible. But my understanding is that would bring that pergola area very close to the boundary. And I'm thinking of all the properties that are opposite that particular area. They're going to have people sitting outside, you know, in that area late into the night, dining outside. I mean, it's worse than having an actual wall there.
And your concern with that is the noise and the visual impacts, is it? Or
well, I mean, I have spent some time looking at the actual requirements and the controls to try to understand it. And my understanding is that that is part of the control purpose, is to protect the amenity, the privacy, visual and acoustic privacy for the neighbours that are right across the road and right adjacent. I don't think it's fair on them that this would be this area would be so far forward of the building line, where everyone else is required to stick to the building lines.
Thank you. And you mentioned just while we're talking about, you mentioned then late night hours, and through your presentation yesterday, you mentioned the hours of operation. If the application was to be approved, what would you see as reasonable hours of operation for a development such as that? What would you see as acceptable in your area?
Well, as I said in my presentation, so far as the supermarket goes, I think that if it was aligned to the opening hours for the shops that are existing shops at Eastern Road, that would be much fairer. I mean, at the moment, the supermarket is proposing a 14-hour day shopping, and that doesn't count for, staff movements before and after. I mean, that is a huge impact on this neighbourhood. I mean, it's for us. I not just for myself. Obviously, I don't live adjacent. For all the people that live right next door, it's not fair, I don't think. And so something that's anything actually, but more aligned to what neighbourhood shops are meant to be. I think it's excessive. 14 hours is excessive.
So what's your concept?
What's my concept? Well, I have...
In terms of hours of operation?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think, say if it's open to 7 to 7, 12 hours a day would be, I think, more than enough for people to do their shopping there. You've got the the cafes and things, they're a different question, but the supermarket is the main draw card there. And I feel that is big issue, because it's going to draw people out of area especially because of the hours of operation. And I don't think that's what is meant by neighbourhood shops.
And so in terms of the cafes, you would be accepting of the hours proposed for those. Is that what you...
Look, I'm not an expert on it. And I do think it's excessive. I mean, if I live next door, I'd be jumping up and down. Absolutely. I think 15 hours a day is excessive. And I think 12 hours is more reasonable. So that's my opinion.
Thank you for that. And just one last question, if I can. You mentioned the 2 gates to Alice Street.
Yes.
And you appreciate that the intention for at least one of the gates is that it only be emergency.
Yes.
If the 2 gates were defined as that, would that satisfy your concerns there?
Yeah, well, I raised them in my submission to the plans and amended plans because they weren't on the original plans, and they don't seem to be. They're certainly not in the DCP. So I think that if it's a requirement for safety and they are clearly labelled as emergency exits, then that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your assistance, Ms. Murphy, and obviously the panel is going to take account of the things that you've said. Now, reverting back to what I was saying, is there a lead spokesman for the applicant?
Yes, Commissioner Talbot, David Hines.
Hines, thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Hines. Yes, thank you. And what's your role, Mr. Hines?
I'm the development manager and also in conjunction with the Harris family, owner of the site.
Thank you. And you have with you Simon Smith,
A town planner from SJB. Ari Wilson from Tandem, representing our architects.
Yes, and Harris Farm, Darren Weir.
Darren Weir from Harris Farm, and also I think observing, but on the call, we have our project managers Touchstone, James Marchup and Sam Zlatevsky. And also because we sent a note through to council about the drafting of the Green Star clause, we've got representatives from ADP here if there are any questions about that minor amendment that was proposed on that point.
Thank you. All right, well, is there somebody who wishes to address the panel in general terms?
Yes, that would be me.
All right, I'll give you 3 minutes to do that now, and then we'll deal with the issues seriatim, as it were, after we've heard from you.
Thank you very much. I know I hopefully won't take up the 3 minutes, other than to say that since the site was acquired in early 2017 after a failed planning proposal from Audi for the site, we have worked very closely with initially Council's strategic planning team and presented schemes for the site which have been assessed in detail by council officers and considered in detail by councillors. Following that lengthy process, the land was rezoned by council, and following that, we've then been engaged in a lengthy process with council's assessment team to get to the point where we are today. I acknowledge the comments from the residents that have been made at this meeting, and I also note the detailed response to all of the submissions made by all of the residents in the officer report. I think the officer report does a very thorough job of assessing the application in detail, and in our engagement with the staff over the last year or so, that I don't think one stone's been left unturned. And so from our perspective, we support the report, we support the consideration the council officers have made of the concerns raised by the community. We're very proud of what we put forward. I think it's going to make an excellent contribution, and specifically in comparison to what is there at the moment. And as I said, our team's here today to answer any questions that might come from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a number of matters. While they're just fresh in our mind, there were some matters raised by Ms. Murphy as a consequence of her exchange with Mr. Arnott, and the question of the retention of the camellia hedge and the hours of operation and the gates to Alice Street. Does someone wish to address those issues?
Can I don't know whether it's appropriate. Is it a matter that council officers can address any of these, or would you rather they come from the applicant? Because I know
I want to hear the applicant's reaction to that.
Okay. So if I go with the camellia hedge, I don't know who in my team has a specific view on that hedge, other than I know that the landscape plan that's been prepared has been developed in considerable detail with council staff and a number of different council staff, and hence the hedge I don't think has been regarded by staff as something that's worthy of retention, as opposed to the alternative that has been put forward in the landscape plans.
Well, thank you. The hours of operation.
Again, on the hours of operation, substantial research was undertaken by us as applicant and presented to council of hours of operation of other neighbourhood centres and other, including supermarkets and the other uses that are proposed here, which we consider support the hours that have been recommended for adoption by council officers, and similarly they must have been proven satisfactory to council officers. And that was research of all of the other neighbourhood centres in the Ku-ring-gai LGA.
I think some panel members, Mr. Arnott perhaps might wish to raise some issue about the hours of operation. You want to do that?
Thank you.
You want to do that, Mr. Arnott?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I have had a look at the analysis of other centres you have done, and it seemed to me that most of the neighbourhood centres didn't have hours quite as extensive as you're proposing, and certainly that other Harris Farm operations seem successfully operating for less extensive hours as well. I wonder if you could just comment on that as to why you see the need for more extensive hours at this Harris Farm operation as opposed to some others that you operate.
I've got Darren Weir from Harris Farm who may want to add something to this, but from my recollection, this is not unusual for other Harris Farm stores. It is not uncommon for other Harris Farm stores in neighbourhood centres and nor is it out of context or out of contemplation for other neighbourhood centres in the Ku-ring-gai LGA. And I just add one more thing to that, is that, and again, Darren can potentially speak to this further, is that by far, the vast majority of customers that come to Harris Farm stores in neighbourhood centres are local people, and potentially even at the early morning and the later parts of the day, they're even more local, given the convenience factor for people living around it.
Mm-hmm. So I think your analysis looked at local centres and neighbourhood centres, and I appreciate that there were examples in local centres that went for more extensive hours, but I think most of those in neighbourhood centres were more constrained, both, well, particularly in the evening, but sometimes in the morning. Is there anything that you could suggest as being acceptable if the hours were to be reduced?
Darren, you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Weir. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Weir, you've got the floor.
Yep, sorry, I just wasn't sure. Look, the hours I think that have been proposed are less than what we would normally ask for. Sorry, the hours that have been proposed in the council report are generally less than what would normally be proposed in these sorts of developments and applications. Generally, there are 7 till 10 p.m. Evening hours of operations. A lot of the centres that we operate in today operate until that 10 p.m. guideline. We're very comfortable with the proposed hours of 7 till 9 that's presented and support those hours.
So there's no suggestion of what might be acceptable. For example, you do have Harris Farms that cease at 8 p.m, don't you?
There are some that do so.
And there are some that start at 8 a.m, particularly on Sundays, for example.
I'd have to double check that. I'm not across the starting hours, but the majority of our stores do start at 7 a.m. in the morning.
Not all of those would be in a neighbourhood centre, though, would they? Some of them would be in shopping centres.
Some of them are in neighbourhood centres, yes, at 7 a.m.
Some are not.
Well, I'm happy to go into, rather than doing it off the cuff, to come back with a response on this.
I think we'd be sort of more interested to understand what the hours are, and then we can respond to that.
The hours, which hours, sorry?
No, I think we support the officer recommendation, and we don't propose, Mr. Arnott, that they be varied. And if there's a discussion that that if there's suggested alternative hours, then obviously that conversation can be held. But we've done a lot of research on the hours that have been proposed. With the fact that we put all the basement car parking and all of the loading underground. Again, that's another sort of factor that sort of internalises a lot of any noise and traffic, and so hence again, it is people want to go and shop at those times because that's what they want to do. Local people want to shop. The Harris Farm doesn't want to open a shop until 9 o'clock if no one shops there. The reason why it wants to open till 9 o'clock is because people who live in that community, they're not going to drive from Hornsby to Harris Farm at Taramara at 9 o'clock at night, but they're going to be local people that live there who want to go.
We're raising it in the context of what's just been said from the people who live in the neighbourhood rather than the demand from the customer. And I mean, just to put something on the table, as you asked, let's have a discussion around 9 p.m. for the supermarket and 10 p.m. for the food services.
That's what it's currently proposed at, I understand. I wonder, Mr. Hines, as you raised the issue of the car parking, if The at-grade car park at the rear would cease to operate at an earlier hour.
Can I just say, again, I reiterate our support for the proposed hours. And again, if you want to go to the analysis that we've done of the other non-supermarket uses in neighbourhood centres in the LGA, many of them open later than 10 p.m. And if there is concern about people sitting outside the conservatory at later hours, there are plenty of precedents in local centres elsewhere in the LGA where those things stay open later. So to the point, if practically speaking, and that I think, you know, if that was what was required, again, subject to any comments from anyone on my team here, if it meant that, you know, at 9 o'clock, the at-grade car park closed, or was, you know, then that's certainly something we can consider.
David, Simon here from SJB Planning. Is it okay if I provide some input?
Thank you.
Hi everyone. As I said, I'm from.
I invite you to, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Waiting patiently, the panel chair. Just regard to that hours of operation, this came up during our RFI response in February earlier this year. What my memo, which should have formed part of the overall package, was highlighting, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, retail behaviour has changed, particularly with COVID, and particularly these type of food and beverage offerings. So hence, because of that behavioural shift, there needs to be more flexibility regarding the hours. That was one thing just to add. The second point was, in the memo and on the plans, it's noted that there's an acoustic wall proposed to the eastern boundary of the at-grade car park. So that is designed to mitigate not just hours of operation, but also car movement noise as well.
Well, just interrupting there needs to be some clarification, particularly by Mr. Arnott, I think, in relation to the height of that fence. Mr. Arnott?
I was just, I've asked the officers if they could just clarify in terms of the acoustic wall. It seems that it's 2.2 metres, but at points the car park is elevated up to about 1.2 metres, I think. So I was just wanting to get some assurance that that the wall height was still sufficient in terms of that acoustic barrier, considering it's only a metre above the height of the car park levelling part. Simon, maybe you can respond to that. My understanding is that it's 2.2 metres from existing ground, but I can also double check the plans as well in the background. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, continue on then, Mr. Weir.
Sorry, just on that point, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Fletcher.
Was the acoustic testing, the acoustic analysis done on the basis of the car park levels and height, fence height as proposed?
I'm happy to answer that, team. Yes, that was born out of the acoustic report. It was a direct recommendation.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, I think we intervened on your presentation, so would you continue?
Thank you, panel chair. That was, I just wanted to add those 2 bits of information. One, that we outlined this in our RFI response in February, where I highlighted the behavioural shifts, and also in that document, we referenced the acoustic wall to the eastern site boundary. The other, I guess, while I'm thinking, the environmental health reviewed the subject hours. There is no defined hours of operation for the locality. It's on a merit basis. Hence, we did the research coupled with the mitigation options and put forward those hours. Are you aware of other premises within the Eastern Road shopping precinct that are open to those hours? We have I think because of the scale of the shops, there's different degrees of hours. We do have a list that we can cross-check. And in terms of the
liquor shop probably open.
Yeah.
They have fixed hours.
I don't think they were open to 10 p.m. From that list, from my recollection.
Oh. All right.
We go 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
Yeah. I'm just trying to find the one that's got all of 105 Eastern in it. Sorry, Eastern Road shops.
I think our understanding that BWS was 10 p.m. But
according to their listing on Google, they're open till 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. That helps.
Thanks, Ari.
And from your just referring to those days of the week, are there days of the week, particularly perhaps for the food and drink premises, that you see a reduced hours may be acceptable as opposed to the longer hours, perhaps weekends being when you would prefer the longer hours to occur?
Mr. Chair, can I ask the question of the applicant whether they would have objection to the condition relating to hours of operation being one subject to review? In other words, approved as you're seeking, but with a right of review after 12 months of operation. Do you have any comments to make if the condition were modified in that way?
Darren?
Look, we're very supportive of the hours that are being proposed. I understand your point, your question, Mr. Fletcher. That would be a difficult one to answer on the basis that we make plans around cost and operation of running our business. So if those things change 12 months in, that can become quite difficult from an operational perspective and add significant cost if they were to go any less than what they were once we've been up and operating. So hence why we're very supportive of the hours that are proposed.
Can I just expand on that a little bit to say that if the hours that they would revert to were defined, but a 12-month trial at the current hours was incorporated into the condition, allowing you to put in a modification application to keep those hours operating beyond the trial period if it's proved to be acceptable, that would give you, before you commence any work on for the project, an understanding of what the fallback position would be within the condition and whether it would be viable for you or not to proceed.
Alternatively, the hours could be reduced as being discussed along the lines discussed in this consent, and the question of any modification would arise after it has been examined in practice.
Yes.
I think I just also add the point that council has other tools available to it in the event of breaches of noise, breaches of other conditions of consent that are quite specific about noise issuing from the property. And again, to Darren's point about certainty, you're sitting there, in a very difficult environment that we have at the moment, and wanting to provide certainty to operators of, say, the conservatory or whatever it might be. Oh, by the way, you can open, particularly if you've got dinner and the like, you can, to have that sort of vagary about whether you can or can't be there. And again, trial periods, I really don't, like you can have, I think if I'm sitting there to be really frank and I'm a neighbour and I want to stop this and I just go and complain at every single instance I can to try and say, oh, listen, there's been 500 noise complaints during a trial period. Like it's actually genuinely, if something has been done wrong, the council has those rights as a council pursuant to breaches of conditions of consent. I think that gives more certainty to the applicant and to the community and the council so that the system can't be gamed.
All right, well, I think we've got the drift. Anything further that any panel member would wish to raise with the representative of the applicant?
Yes, Mr.
In that respect.
Oh,
All right, Mr. Teresi, you wish to raise some matters. The matter of the crossing
yes.
and the pergola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand as part of the submission of your application, you've actually prepared a plan which has identified a whole series of civic works around the site. I guess in terms of the context and given the existing uses, which actually are located to the south, being the other shops and council's car park, I would have thought that there actually is a link to those uses with your site. So having regard to that context, the question I've got to the applicant is, what is your view or position in actually, if the application was approved, in providing an elevated crossing along the Tennyson Avenue, which would actually link the uses holistically?
Mr. Teresi, when we went through the extensive process of negotiating the or trying to seek approval to our planning proposal, we discussed those matters with council officers, and they didn't see fit to pursue a BPA at that point in time. And the legal position that was adopted was that we would, pay the Section 711 contributions, and that anything that was flowed as an incident, like you've got to do curb and guttering and footpaths from the project, then that was that. But the other matters about diagonal parking on Tennyson or the raised crossing, they are not matters that flow from the project in that sort of 7-11 sense of our contention. Simon, I might be talking over matters that you as a planner can probably address further.
Can I just say I'm not making reference to the plan in the DCP and that other parking associated along Tennyson Avenue. The question I was raising was quite more specific in terms of one additional aspect, and that is the actual connection of the actual crossing component only, and not any other components as part of it. I see that there is actually a link from a nexus point of view, because the reality is going to be you are going to have customers who are going to be utilising the other services which are on the other side of the street. And I'd be very surprised to say that they're going to be turning around, hopping in their vehicles and then driving into your car park if they've already utilised on-street car parking, being the council's car park and the parking in front of those shops. So the question I see is that there is going to be a cross-fertilisation of people across both of those areas. So that's why the question is only specifically relating to the crossing and not any other components as identified in the plan. So it is quite pointed to one aspect and one aspect.
But as what happens now is people go and park in the car parking that's already there at the nursery, because there's space in there for them, and they walk across as it currently stands to the shops there anyway. And so it's not as if this is new. And so, in fact,
the scale of development is very different between the comparison of the service station and the nursery to what you're proposing now.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we're paying a significant amount of money in Section 711s, but it's like digging up a road and services and doing all those things. It's a significant expense. I understand what you're saying, and it's an arguable matter. I mean, the officers obviously haven't formed the view that you are, but all the consent authority is entitled to that as well, and you're very experienced. But it's an expensive commitment, that's for sure.
Apart from the expense, do you recognise the legitimacy of such a suggestion?
I'm supporting the position of the officers, and what I've just said is that yes, we are improving our site, but we're also doing a bunch of other things that we didn't need to do, such as the loading dock that is currently at grade directly adjacent to the neighbours in Alice Street, with trucks coming in there and dropping trees and forklifts and the like running around. We decided to put that underground ourselves. We decided to put parking underground ourselves to provide for the majority of the people that are coming to the site to be housed underground. And so I just, it's because it's all new and shiny and much improved, in our opinion, to what's there. I don't think it therefore follows that we've got to do a pedestrian footpath to the other side. I mean, in fact, to be honest, if what we are saying is going to, in our view, it's going to be popular in the local community, and a lot of people from the local community who come there are going to go and visit those shops. If anybody was going to be saying, okay, who's going to benefit from it more, it would be those shops. So, I'm happy to split the cost with them.
All right, I think we got your attitude. Mr. Teresi, do you have anything further on that aspect?
Not on that aspect. I do have another issue I want to raise.
Thank you.
In terms of your access to your development to your basement car park, I note on the plans, obviously it's quite long and deep into the site. And I understand there's a need for clearance. Now, I'm a bit concerned that there's a lack of softening of those walls to the actual basement. And I appreciate, digging a basement, you're going to have that interface. One of the things I'm mooting as a potential suggestion and engaging your views in terms of this, if it was approved, was that whether you would entertain a pergola type structure, which might start roughly on the eastern side of your orchard feature on the corner, which would have a height of obviously 4.1 for clearance, obviously, so you can get your trucks down as per your clearance. And you can step that down to the entry of the development. It can be pergola, it can be open structured. You've got a theme and language of pergolas and vines running through the building. So I can see from an architectural point of view, the language would be consistent with what you're proposing to do, and it would soften that whole length of driveway. Is that something which you would be prepared to think about or consider?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just when you were saying, I thought you were actually going to say something about putting some greenery along the walls of the driveway. And I thought, I was thinking to myself, if we could do that, we'd do that too. But, what you've said, if we can do that, then I don't think, Ari, is there any problem with us doing something like that? You're on mute.
No problem at all. Yeah, that'd be lovely to do that.
Thank you.
Let's have a look at that.
Mr. Chair, I've got no other specific questions.
No more specific. Returning to Mr. Arnott. Mr. Arnott, you wish to have a look at the provision of staff showers and the impact that might have on the floor space situation. But I'll leave it to you to put it in the terms that you put it earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I just wondered if I could ask, I note that in the basement there are 3 toilets, one of which is an accessible toilet, and whether there could be provision for a staff shower within that as well. I'm not sure whether that would constitute compliance with the disability discrimination requirements, but I just wondered if it's possible, if not within there, a staff shower to be provided without increasing the floor space on the site.
Simon or Ari, do you have any thoughts on that? In principle, if again, if it didn't affect the floor space, because everything's quite tight, in principle there'd be no problem. But
that's where someone needs to look on the site elsewhere. If Mr. Arnott suggests looking at that area of the disabled toilet, is there somewhere else within the existing floor space?
Yeah, can I ask just Mr. Arnott, just the background of why traditionally supermarkets or food markets haven't had a
it wouldn't
shower.
be. Yes.
What was the thinking behind that thought?
It was a comment provided from one of the council officers in referrals. It came through, I think, in referral. Obviously, not necessarily within that location, but the desirability to have staff facilities that included a shower facility. It's desirable to encourage active transport, and staff are encouraged to use active transport, cycle to work, and a staff shower is a good facility to provide in that respect. It's not intended for visitors to the site or, customers. It's for staff.
No, thank you. I understood the need for staff. Like in my 27 years of working for supermarkets and food markets, I've never had a shower at work. Especially when I've done a lot of time in stores, I've never had a shower at work. And
you ride a bike?
I rode a bike every single day till I was 25.
And you still got promoted as well.
And I still got.
Yeah, I guess my question is,
I understand
if it might be possible.
But, well, yep, sure.
My question is, if it would be possible. It came through as a comment recommended from officers, not in the conditions, but and I'm just questioning, if it's possible to incorporate one.
Sorry, the panel, regarding the GFA in the basement, it might be tricky depending on the layouts. We'd probably have to examine that a little closer, given its location. There may be scope at ground where GFA is already included, but we'd have to look at that specifically. It's hard to put an area on it definitively.
And you are not confident that it could be fitted within the existing disabled toilet at basement?
Ari, do you think that's a possibility?
I think we should look at it within the existing disabled toilet if possible in the basement. If it's something that council is very particularly focused on, then we're happy to consider it.
Thank you. Can I just ask?
You wanted to raise the gates in Alice Street.
Yes, you heard Miss Murphy making reference to 2 gates in Alice Street. Is the intention that they both be for emergency access and egress only?
Maybe on that one, it's from our point of view, we've been guided by council on that. To me, if it was our preference, we would actually, it would be nice if people from Alice Street could enter into the orchard from Alice Street, but the position of the council staff has been that it'd be for emergency egress only, and we don't have a problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Arnott, there was another thing about the car park at night.
I think I've spoken about that. I think I've received an answer to that I raised it a bit earlier, and I think Mr. Hines said that your desire would be to keep it open at night, but if it was a problem, you would consider shutting that at night. Is that right, Mr. Hines?
If it was for that 9 till 10 period, yes.
Thank you. Do you have a view about outdoor dining between that 9 and 10 p.m. period, if that is restricted?
I think it would, if it was, again, I think it, based on other examples and in the area, and again, council's got provisions available to it if it is too noisy. That I think, again, we maintain the position I set out before, that we support the officer's recommendation without trial period or limitation.
There's one other issue that the panel would like to have some clarification on, that is in relation to trucks turning across the centre line, and whether that's desirable, and if so, whether undesirable, whether something can be done about it. Exiting the site, not entering.
Both, I think, Mr. Chair.
Both. All right.
I think just to put in context here, how many trucks and what nature of trucks we're talking about. Given the restrictions on the height, these are not sort of large trucks that you typically see outside of Woolies or a Coles. The big, these are smaller trucks that are specific for this particular site and other Harris Farm sites like it, where you have to, you're in residential areas, you're a bit more constrained. So they're not large trucks, and volume of deliveries is probably 2 to 3 a day. And Darren, please correct me if I'm wrong in this. Within times that work for the community, for school kids, like sort of off-peak times, and also not outside of hours. And so from the traffic assessment, again, a lot of work's been done on turning circles and in and out. And I think on the basis of that, when you're talking about 2 to 3 truck movements a day in defined timeframes, it's not. And again, the work that's been done to get to the design that we have, I think it'd be pretty difficult to change that current design, particularly given flooding issues and all the other bits and pieces that go with it, and the length of the ramp, given the fall that's required. We've certainly worked to get the best situation that we possibly can. And again, that goes back to having the loading dock underground, as opposed to having it like the current situation where they're coming off Tennyson.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Sorry, Mr. Chair, am I able to keep asking a couple of questions around that?
If you have some more, Mr. Hines.
Around
Mr. Arnott, I mean. I note Mr. Hines' response.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about the truck movement. So you mentioned in your response there that there are specific trucks. What size are they? 12-metre trucks?
Yep. So the truck movements that David's talking to is roughly there's about three main trucks per day, being a predominantly fresh food market retailer trying to get the freshest stock to the customers of the community. And they're sitting around the 12.5 metre size.
And so generally speaking, for a truck of that size, I think a 4.5 metre clearance is generally required. Is 4.08 going to be acceptable in your view?
Yep. It is.
Yep.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on that.
We've actually built a truck in a like centre or a like location that's same higher length and height. So that it would be roughly that one that would service this area.
Right. And you mentioned that the truck deliveries would occur outside of operating hours.
No, we haven't said that. That was one of the residents or one of the.
Oh, sorry, I thought Mr. Hines said that earlier. Sorry.
No, most of our deliveries, Mr. Arnott, would be between the approved hours that have been recommended. Starting, I think it's 7 till 9.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it's from memory. So we would work within those hours, and the first truck would be sometime around 7 o'clock ish, and then there would be two trucks post that.
And is that necessary at that time every day of the week?
Yes.
So weekends, Sundays.
Yep.
7 a.m. truck delivery on a Sunday.
Yeah. Well, we're supportive of the hours that are being.
I've heard that.
recommended, and we are a fresh food retail business predominantly, and for us to give the customers the best, freshest stock, it's daily deliveries from the market.
Thank you.
Let me have a roll call. Mr. Fletcher, have you got anything that you wish to raise? Anything further?
No, nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Derisi?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Arnott, you've dealt with most of the issues that you wanted to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Well, that's been a very useful discussion, and the panel's been assisted by it. The panel will now have to consider the whole project, and in particular the matters that have been discussed this afternoon, and that will be done immediately following the closure of this public meeting, and the decision will hopefully be made today, this afternoon, and the outcome will be published on the council's website within 24 hours. Thank you, members of the public and members supporting the application, for your assistance and for the information that you've provided. Someone want to say something?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, interrupt you, but Sean Garland from the council, we just need to publicly declare no conflicts of interest as well.
Oh, the staff. Yes, thank you.
And I'd just like to declare there's no conflict for staff.
Thank you. Anything further from the official table?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. So I'm declaring the meeting closed, and as I said, the decision of the panel will be published on the website within 24 hours. Thank you for your assistance. Good afternoon.